Ever feel like Christianity got stuck back in the good old days? Always looking over our shoulders at these old stories and rules.
Yeah, I could see that.
But here's the thing, even way back then, those early Christians, they felt that tension too.
Interesting.
And that's where this book, Hebrews, comes in. It's like a bridge between those old ways and this radical, brand new faith centered on, you guessed it, Jesus.
A bridge. That's a good way to put it.
Mm.
So are we diving into this book?
We are diving deep. And get this, it all starts with a bang. Jesus is superior to even angels.
Whoa, hold on a sec. Now that's a bold claim right there.
Yeah.
You got to remember, back then, angels were a big deal. They weren't just like cute little harp players.
Right.
Angels were seen as these crazy, powerful beings, messengers of God's power. I mean, think about it. Jewish folks at the time already had mad respect for angels.
So why even bring it up then? If everyone already agrees angels are top tier, why would the writer of Hebrews even need to argue that Jesus was, well, more superior?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Because, see, for those early Jewish Christians, accepting Jesus as like the ultimate top dog, it meant they had to rethink everything they thought they knew about God, about his power, about how he interacts with the world.
So it's kind of like saying, okay, you thought angels were impressive, hold my drink.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, let me tell you about Jesus.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit, because Hebrews, it doesn't beat around the bush, right?
Not at all.
It dives right in head first, claiming Jesus is the brightness of his glory, the express image of God.
Mhm.
It even goes as far as to say that he holds everything together with his powerful word.
Whoa. Now, that's a bold statement.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just, poetic license or anything.
Right.
You got to remember, a lot of those early Christians, they were wrestling with how this whole new faith in Jesus meshed with the old covenant.
Yeah.
The one with all the laws, all those rituals.
So by saying, hey, God has spoken definitively through his son, the writer is what? Shaking things up a bit?
Oh, absolutely. Imagine being used to God speaking through prophets or these intricate systems for, like, centuries.
Right.
And then, bam, he
Yeah.
sends his son. It's like upgrading from a handwritten note to
Yeah.
a face-to-face, heart-to-heart. The level of, like, intimacy and clarity,
Yeah.
it's completely different.
Night and day.
Totally.
And that changes everything. But here's what I find really interesting.
Mhm.
Hebrews keeps drawing these comparisons between Jesus and angels,
Oh, yeah.
almost like it's anticipating some pushback, you know?
Exactly. And then you get to verses like Hebrews 1.5:14, and it's crystal clear. Jesus,
Ah.
superior. Not just a little bit better, but in a completely different league altogether.
So it's not about, like, ranking them, not some celestial pecking order. Right. It's more about understanding the sheer scale of what God did by sending Jesus.
Yeah.
It's like it totally reframes how we understand God's power and presence in the world.
Precisely. And this isn't just some abstract theology debate.
Oh, I know, right?
This has massive implications for how we live our lives.
You're right. It makes me think about all those times I've tried to be good enough for God, following all the rules, trying to earn those brownie points.
Yeah.
But if Jesus is the ultimate expression of God's power and love, maybe it's less about my performance review and more about embracing this new relationship he made possible.
And that is a fantastic point, because it leads right into this warning we see in Hebrews 2.1-4 about not neglecting so great a salvation.
Yeah.
The writer's basically saying, look, this isn't just another story. This is the climax of God's plan, and to ignore it would be to miss out on something incredible.
Yeah, they're not messing around. They even talk about how neglecting this salvation, the one confirmed by God with actual signs and wonders, it's like turning your back on God himself.
Because for them, it wasn't just about saying you believe it, It was about putting your money where your mouth is, staking your whole life on this belief that Jesus was and is the Son of God.
So what does neglecting this salvation even look like today? We don't have pillars of fire or seas parting anymore, so how do we know if we're falling into that trap?
It's definitely more subtle, but just as risky. Here, think of it like this. Imagine you get this map to a hidden treasure, but you just toss it aside
Oh,
because you're too busy or distracted by all the shiny stuff along the way.
wow. That analogy really hits home.
Yeah.
So we've got Jesus, the ultimate game changer, completely off the charts compared to anything else, and this urgent message to not let that truth slip through our fingers.
Right.
But then Hebrews throws another curveball, the idea of Jesus as our high priest.
Things are about to get really interesting, because the writer is about to completely redefine what it means to have a go-between for humanity and God.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. But before we go any further, can you remind me what was so important about high priests in the Old Testament? I remember those fancy robes and like animal sacrifices, but I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Great question. In the Old Testament, the high priest was the only one allowed into the Holy of Holies.
Like
It's
the
super sacred space in the temple that symbolized God's presence.
right.
He's like the mediator, offering sacrifices for everyone's sins.
Yeah.
It was a huge deal.
Huge. So how does Jesus fit into all of this? What makes him such a unique high priest?
Well, here's the thing. Those Old Testament priests, as holy and revered as they were still human.
Yeah.
They still faced temptation, doubt, all the stuff we deal with.
Right.
But Jesus, now, he was different. He lived a perfect life, fully God and fully human all at once.
So he gets our struggles, but he's also untouched by all the things that separate us from God.
You got it. Hebrews 4.15 nails it. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Boom, mic drop.
Right. That changes everything.
It's like having a friend who not only gets you, but they also show you a whole new way of living.
That makes so much sense. It's not about pretending we have it all together. It's about having someone who bridges that gap for us. Someone who makes it possible to connect with God even though we're, well, us.
And that bridge, it leads straight to the heart of this new covenant. Because Jesus, as our perfect high priest, he makes this new way of relating to God possible.
Okay, I'm following you, but how does that work practically? Because even though we have Jesus, life isn't always smooth sailing. We still mess up, still face challenges. So how's this new covenant different from the old one day to day? Give me the real deal.
All right, think of it like this. Ever tried to kick a bad habit?
Oh, tell me about it.
You should, like eat healthy or whatever.
Yeah.
So you try to tough it out, willpower alone.
Spoiler alert, it doesn't work.
Exactly. Because real change, the kind that sticks, has to come from somewhere deeper. And that's what this new covenant is all about. Hebrews 8.10 says, God will put his laws in their mind and write them on their hearts. It's not about external pressure, but about God transforming us from the inside out.
Okay, now that's powerful. But if this new covenant is so much better, why even talk about the old one? Why does Hebrews spend so much time pointing out its flaws? It seems kind of harsh.
It's all about context. See, the Old Covenant, with its laws and sacrifices, it had a purpose. It showed us how real sin is and how much we need forgiveness.
Yeah.
But it was always pointing to something more, something complete.
So it's like the old covenant was a flashlight, but then Jesus shows up and suddenly, bam! It's like someone flipped on the stadium lights.
Perfect analogy. Those old sacrifices, as well-intentioned as they were just temporary fixes.
Temporary.
Hebrews 9.9 to 10 even says they couldn't make people perfect in regard to the conscience.
They couldn't get to the root of the issue.
Couldn't truly deal with sin at its core.
Yeah.
And that's where Jesus' sacrifice comes in. Hebrews goes all in on emphasizing that his death, that was the ultimate, the once and for all sacrifice.
Right, no more Band-Aids.
No more. Hebrews 9.real puts it this way. Christ entered that most holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption.
Hold on right there. That word eternal just jumps out at me. We use it so casually, but here in this context, it's huge.
It is massive because it means that because of Jesus, we have access to complete forgiveness. This restored relationship with God that's not based on us, but on his grace. We don't have to keep reliving our mistakes or live in fear of messing up.
That's the good news we so easily forget, right? It's not about earning it. It's about receiving this amazing gift of grace through what Jesus did.
And here's where things get really interesting. Because really accepting that gift, that changes everything.
How so? I'm all ears.
Think about it. If you truly grasp that your sins, they're forgiven, that you're accepted by God, not because of you, but because of what Jesus already did, how does that change how you live? Your motivations, your priorities, everything.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Because it's not just about feeling good inside, right? This understanding of grace, forgiveness, it has to affect how we live.
Exactly. That's what the writer of Hebrews is building up to. It's like he's saying, okay, now that you get this incredible gift you've been given, what are you going to do with it?
So it's not enough to just understand it in our heads. We've got to live it out.
Exactly. And that's where faith and endurance come in. Hebrews 10.112 and 25 talks about holding tight to our faith, not shrinking back when things get tough. It's a call to action.
Because following Jesus, let's be real, it's not always easy. We're going to hit bumps in the road, face doubts and temptations.
And that's why the writer uses this powerful image of a race in Hebrews 12. He's saying, this is a marathon, my friend, not a sprint. You'll want to quit sometimes, but keep your eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. That's Hebrews 12.2.
I love that imagery. And the best part, we're not running this race alone.
Not at all. Hebrews reminds us we've got a whole cloud of witnesses surrounding us, those who ran the race before us and showed us what it means to live by faith, even when things were rough.
Speaking of, can you give me an example? Who are some of these witnesses and what did they face?
Well, you've got Abraham, right? The guy who took that leap of faith when God called him to a new land.
Oh yeah, no GPS, no Google Maps back then.
No kidding. He had zero clue where he was going.
Talk about a trust fall. Leaving everything behind based on a promise he couldn't even see yet. That's wild.
No doubt. And then there's Moses. Faced off against Pharaoh himself, led the Israelites out of slavery,
Intense.
even when it seemed downright impossible.
These aren't just like bedtime stories, are they? These were real people, real struggles, real doubts. But they chose to trust God, even when it was hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they kept going, not because they were superhuman or anything, but because they fixed their eyes on that promise, on something way bigger than themselves.
And now they're in our corner, cheering us on like, you got this, it's worth it.
What a picture, right? And it's not just about looking back either. It's about looking ahead to that city God's prepared for us.
Yeah.
Hebrews 11 lays it all out. It's like we're all in this race together, headed toward this incredible future God's promised us.
I'm totally on board with that. But let's be real, the Christian life, it's not always sunshine and rainbows. So how does Hebrews speak to those times when things get tough, when God feels distant and we're tempted to throw in the towel?
That's where Hebrews 12.5:11 hits different.
Oh, yeah.
It talks about how God disciplines those he loves, not to punish, but to shape us, to make us more like him.
That makes sense. Like a good parent, right? They correct their kids, not because they enjoy it, but because they want the best for them.
Exactly. And just like a parent's discipline, it might not feel great in the moment, but God's discipline, it can be tough. But we can trust him. He's using those tough times to refine us, to burn away the things that are holding us back from truly experiencing him.
Okay, that's actually really encouraging. So instead of getting discouraged when trials come knocking, because let's be honest, they always do, you can choose to see them as opportunities to grow.
You got it. And remember, we're not facing them alone. We've got that cloud of witnesses cheering us on. Plus, we have each other. Hebrews encourages us to strengthen the hands which hang down and the feeble knees to make straight paths for your feet. That's Hebrews 12.1113.
We need each other, that's for sure.
We do. Lift each other up, support one another, and never take our eyes off that finish line.
Man, what a journey this deep dive has been. So as we wrap this up, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from our conversation today?
I think it boils down to this. We serve an amazing God, a God who spoke his ultimate word through his son, Jesus,
Amen to that.
a son who's greater than any angel, who humbled himself to walk in our shoes, and who gave himself as that once-and-for-all sacrifice for our sins. He invites us into this new covenant, one that's not about checking boxes or being perfect, but about his grace and his transforming love.
And that changes everything.
Right. Because of that, we can live with this confidence, this knowing. We have a high priest who speaks to God for us, a God who only wants the best for us, and a future brimming with hope and purpose.
Brimming with hope. I love that. This hasn't been a passive deep dive, has it? The writer of Hebrews really throws down the gauntlet, these powerful statements, these vivid images. It really makes you wrestle with this message and how it impacts us.
And that's what's so great about it, right? It's a book that gets under your skin, stays with you long after you've finished reading. A book that sparks questions and challenges you to really own your faith.
It really does. And one of those lingering questions for me is from Hebrews 11.1. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. What do you think the writer meant by that, and how does it tie into everything we've talked about today?
Now that is a question, isn't it? Almost like a key, unlocking this whole other level of the Christian life. Maybe it's about holding on to that trust, that unshakable belief in God's love and faithfulness, even when life throws curveballs. Or maybe it's about letting that trust shine through in how we live, showing the world what we believe, even when we can't fully explain it.
Letting our lives do the talking.
Exactly. That's something I think we all need to keep wrestling with as we explore Hebrews and what it means for us.
What a great note to end on. This deep dive into Hebrews has been eye-opening, to say the least. I hope you've gained a new understanding and appreciation for its timeless message.
Me too.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through the book of Hebrews. And until next time, keep exploring.